In the house, our friend Neddie Winters, President Mississippi Mission, Mississippi, and Reverend C.J. Rhodes, pastor of Mount Helm Baptist Church, one of the most dynamic preachers in the state of Mississippi. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning.
It's always a pleasure. I think we're on the wrong mic there. Perez, you want to? Yeah, that's the one there.
Yes, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Take two. Let's see if my man over here is okay. Are you okay, sir?
I'm wonderful.
We got social distancing here, so it's the best way to do that. We can't put a mask on. It's kind of hard. I don't even know where to begin. Neddie, first of all, Mission, Mississippi, I mean, you look at this and you see the need for that organization more now than ever.
Absolutely. And, we keep trying to encourage people to build those relationships so they can have understanding of all that's going on. And so we're in business. Yeah. I call it ministry in unusual ways.
When CJ, when you start looking at the feedback that you're getting, tell me about it.
Yeah, so one of the things I appreciate, and I've experienced this in the last few days, is the number of younger, particularly younger white pastors in the city and throughout the country who are texting, inboxing, saying thank you for your leadership. You're trying to speak to this moment in a way that deals with justice but brings us together. And so that's a wonderful moment, because I think even in this moment you're seeing such a interracial movement afoot of people who recognize, especially in relation to the George Floyd death, that the church and across racial lines has to do something about it. There's certainly a lot of rage, a lot of anger, a lot of uncertainty. I think you put this in the context of COVID-19 sheltering in place, people losing their jobs, people not in contact with folks for a long time. The pressures are just really, really high right now. And at the same time, to see masses of people, by and large, engage in nonviolent and peaceful ways, despite all of that rage, has been powerful. And again, I honor the fact that a number of, particularly white clergy, have expressed their solidarity by showing up to the protests, by talking about it. So this is a very powerful moment, especially for younger folks, because I think we're seeing some degree of solidarity in a way that we may not have seen several years before.
Yeah. We always talk about this narrative, Neddie, about coming to the table and talking. And I mentioned yesterday, and I said I get a almost visceral negative feeling on this, because in the real world, the first people who are willing to come to that table are going to be white Christians and black Christians. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely.
At that table, sometimes the troublemakers will not agree to be there, black and white.
Yeah.
So we always talk about this narrative, but how do you get those people? How do you get the African Americans, the youth out there who were destroying even black ownership businesses? Nobody wants to talk about that. When we talk about this whole thing and what we see playing out on television across the entire country right now, we seem to just be omitting all of the horrendous things that have happened, not only to black homeowners or black business owners, but everybody else, the city of themselves. And there's, I think, some rage on the part of a lot of people, both black and white, not to concentrate on that, saying, look, we stand with you on how bad this death was. This was ridiculous. Regardless of the guy had COVID, we understand he had COVID-19. We understand that he had methamphetamine and fentanyl in his system. It doesn't matter. I mean, the death was primarily caused because there was a knee on his neck. And we stand with you. But how do we get those people that are causing the problem, not the peaceful protesters, how do we get them to talk?
I don't know. In my estimation, they're not really interested in talking. They're interested in doing what they're doing.
Well, then how do we solve the situation?
The solidarity that CJ was talking about in terms of what we do, our action, our conduct, and how we do things together denounces that in a sense and at some level, but also us banding together and not tolerating those things in terms of what we can do together and make the example, the model of how this thing ought to work and do those things that we can't control. There's some things that we can control and that we can do, and so we got to do those things where we can and control. And when that happens, from my perspective, when that happens, a infusion of the supernatural moves in, and God does things that we're incapable of doing.
There is, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, too, a few things. One, I think it's important to note that many of those who are engaging in the protest have spoken out against it. Just the other day, George Floyd's family and his attorney said, we cannot do it this way. We've got to be peaceful. We've got to engage. You can be militant. You can be loud, but you can't go out and destroy stuff. And we have to, and I want to applaud Governor Reeves for the way that he has narrated this. We honor the First Amendment rights of those who are protesting. We understand why they're protesting. We understand what seems to be clear evidence that this was an injustice. We want to bracket that, and then over here talk about the different camps. You've got, just everyday looters and rioters. You've got the Boogaloo Boys. You've got Antifa. There are other groups that come in to try to infiltrate this broader movement. If we can talk about it in those ways, what ends up happening, I think, a lot of times is that this over here becomes louder than the the millions of folks who are not doing that. And so we're able to tease those two things out and then target who are these folks doing this stuff. Let's make sure we deal with that while also hearing the very real cries of folks. Because tragically, in any kind of movement like this, you'll always have parasites.
I understand it, but isn't it kind of hard to focus on the racial discrimination where it does exist when you had buildings burning, sirens going, shots being fired like a war zone? It's kind of hard to concentrate on the real racial aspects on here. Then you got to figure out how do you get those people to the table to talk that are causing the problems? How do we unite black and white to solve that problem? So in the next one, when that happens, both black and white show up at a peaceful protest and attack the problem itself, not through any destruction of property.
Yeah, to me, I'm trying to be logical about it. Give it case in point. Here in Mississippi, there have been numerous protests.
Yeah.
Governor Reeves has spoken about all of them being peaceful. In Nashville, Tennessee, spoke to a pastor friend of mine there. They had a peaceful protest for about 2 hours. After they disbanded, then these folks came in and started doing their stuff. It's clear enough to see in many instances we can stand with these folks here. We can't stand with these folks over there. And again, as I noted, there are a number of white pastors around the country who are saying, we see this and we're going to stand with you.
You think the black pastors in this country have done enough to condemn the violence?
Oh, we do all the time.
Absolutely.
Courtney, I think her name is Courtney Ross. Yeah, it is. The fiance, she spoke. We'll have that audio. And also Camus Bell. Am I pronouncing that right? He was on Conan O'Brien last night. A couple of sound bites from him. It's all coming up. Neddie Winters, Reverend C.J. Rhodes have agreed to come in, and we'll just toss this thing around from now through 8. And then Vince Jordan joins us, CEO of Labaki Industries. That's coming up at 8:05. All right, let's get back to the matters at hand. We were talking about this, and I said something earlier when we were talking about this. Is there enough condemnation from black preachers across the country for what has been going on? Because it's I don't think it's helping race relations at all.
So, my answer was yes. I think about Dr. Jerry Young here in Jackson, who's also the president of the National Baptist Convention, spoke about it in his sermon. I think about a group I'm with called the AND Campaign, younger Bible-believing Christians who believe in justice, and we wrote a statement and we talked about the need for peaceful protest, civil protest, and you can just kind of go down the list. I'm sure Dr. Winters has done the same. You raised a point earlier, though, that is tied to this, because it's the same thing with the white, the Antifa kids and the white nationalists who are infiltrating these marches. Yeah. You can say whatever, you can condemn whatever. The question is, are these folks in any kind of proximity, any kind of relationship with you to even care? I'm seeing, and I'm thankful for this, I'm seeing Jetson Franklin and other, conservative white pastors stepping up and speaking. But a lot of this is also happening with young white folks. Are they in churches? Are they Christians? We don't know. So I think there is on record this standing up against that while also standing up for what's right. And again, as I noted earlier, and I'll keep beating this horse, when Governor Reeves delineated between those two pieces, that to me is the balanced and fair approach to say we condemn the riots, we have to celebrate the protests.
I always want these to be meaningful when we have gatherings like this. And one of the things I've learned, and Neddie's helped me out with this over the years, and I've had so many different conversations about this, is we do speak in two different languages because of where we came from and the path we took to get here. And I think a perfect example prior to this, and you were listening to the Drew Brees cut.
Yeah.
I hear that, and I get, again, just emotionally angry that he's been brought on the table for that. And I wonder the players that reacted in a different manner, did they hear something different, and how and why? You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Could you speak to that?
Well, Paul, we all have this filter based on our culture, based on our background, based on the two different parts of the world. I give them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't hear what he said. They heard that he was.
You heard what he said.
Well, I heard what he said.
Did that sound racist to you?
No, what he said was not sounded racist to me, but
was it racist what he didn't say?
He said what he see and what he feels when the national anthem played and when he see the flag.
So why is he getting pummeled for that?
The narrative now is that you either agree with me or you're my enemy.
That's true.
And so we have a polarized how do I say it, narrative or conversation, and so we're guilty on both parts of clicking and coming together, sounding the sheet of song that we're all on the same sheet, and there's no room for being how do I say it, being agreeable in a disagreeable conversation. Mm-hmm. That we have the right and privilege. He has the right and the privilege to feel and say whatever he feels, and on the other side, they had the same thing. But when I heard you, I thought, well, now don't you act like the people that you're talking about. So, they have a right to disagree with him, whether or not to condemn him to the point that it interferes with his career and they blackball him and all these other things. So we have to be careful sometimes how we condemn, how we criticize others for saying what they're saying. Yeah. I don't get it all.
So in other words, to be responsive to that could be racist itself?
To react to it.
Van Jones was on the other night, and here's what he said.
There's another reality here that you're starting to see. So even the most liberal, well-intentioned white person has a virus in his or her brain that can be activated at an instant. And so what you're seeing now is a curtain falling away. Look in the mirror at how you choke off black opportunity, how you choke off black dignity, how you behave. People are now fed up. People are telling me they're tired of hashtags. It's not the racist white person who's in the Ku Klux Klan that we have to worry about. And James Baldwin said it best. White people in these situations are always innocent. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Teach me, educate me, help me understand. How did this happen? Talk to me, tell me something, tell me what to do. White people are always innocent, and their innocence constitutes their crime.
Pastor C.J. Rhodes.
Too late to be innocent.
Can you respond to that?
Yeah, so let me dovetail not so much with Drew Brees' comment in particular, but I was thinking about something that Russ Latino, who's now with Empower Mississippi, posted, where he basically said, look, I think Drew has a First Amendment right to say what he said and whatnot, but then Colin Kaepernick had a First Amendment right to do what he did, and he began to delineate between how we can filter through those things. And I think it speaks to what Neddie said about oftentimes in soundbite culture, we kind of move past each other. What Van said, I think it's spot on. I mean, I think many of us know that racism isn't just couched within the Republican Party. There are white liberals and progressives. It was interesting that, when I was at the University of Mississippi, I experienced, some degree of racism here and there, but it was amazing to see kind of the paternalism, I would call it, of white liberals who felt the need to sort of do for the black man and do it in a way that was very condescending.
Patronizing.
Very patronizing. And so I opened up to the reality.
Wait a minute. You're saying you find that couched more so in liberals than conservatives or Christians.
Paternalism, probably more so, sort of, yeah, absolutely, among liberals.
All right, you're saying your first amendment right.
Now, that'll take the conservatives off the hook. I mean, the problem is, too.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had confession here. Protestant confession here.
Van said, pull the curtain back.
Yeah. but the reality is many African Americans have been saying these things all along. And which part of the rage you're seeing in this generation among millennials and Gen Z is largely related to what they believe to be the brokenness of the two-party system. They don't believe that Republicans or Democrats care for them. And so some of what they're doing in the streets is saying, we got to get attention some kind of way because Republicans don't care about us. The Democrats don't care about us. They don't think anybody cares about them because we're seeing too many hashtags and too many needless deaths.
You know, Paul, when I listened to Van and what he just said, is that at this stage in the game, you know, the first time we had a viral or visual beating of a African American was Rodney King that went with, you know, and since then we've seen these things. You know, these things happen. In my estimation, happens that are not publicized. How many things happen that's not publicized? So at what point do we decide that we're no longer going to be ignorant? We're no longer lack understanding. Robert Morris, Gateway in Texas, preached a sermon on lack of understanding. And so during that sermon, as he preached it, he came up with the point that ignorant white folks, you know, that works on both sides of the fence. You know, in Smokey and the Bandit, the star there, whatever his name was, I can't remember right now, says, you know, he and the little lady that he was with was trying to figure out whatever they had in common.
Burt Reynolds?
Yeah, Burt Reynolds. They was trying to figure out what they had in common beyond their sexual attraction. And he finally, she'd say something, he'd say something, and they finally went back and forth. And he finally just said, you know, it depends on how ignorant you are and what part of the world you wake up in. and so Stephanie Ketchens, I hope she doesn't mind me saying that, she posted on Facebook a long post. But in that post, she says, it's time for me to do research. It's time for me to read. It's time for me to understand. It's time for me to knowledge. I can no longer not do that. And so,
can we also acknowledge, and I want to play Camus when we come back here, got a quick break. Well, can we also acknowledge that every single day, and there was a horrific story of, well, we saw the black man in the nursing home beat the hell out of this white guy for no other purpose that he just wanted to. We saw a white couple not too long ago being not only shot but tortured. We see these blacks against whites, whites against black happen across America. We're 320 million people. It happens.
yeah.
But there's no equal amount of attention paid to both of them for some reason. But we'll get back to this coming up next.
Yeah, I'd like to finish my
studio. It is Neddie Winters, president of Mission, Mississippi, with an event coming up.
Yes, today at 11:30 at the Bell south of the Capitol there, we're going to gather and pray for our leaders, pray for racial harmony, and pray for our nation, interceding on behalf of our nation, our state, in our local communities. And we just want to show that the church is not standing still. It is not doing anything. The church is doing something. We're praying. We're having conversation. We're having dialogue. I spent a lot of my time on Zoom and others having these conversations, having these dialogue.
Did you ever think that would happen? That Neddie Winters would spend a lot of time on Zoom?
No. You know, we started this, and I was not that familiar with Zoom. I guess I was doing Skype or whatever. But, you know, the challenge we have is that this thing, for me, this thing could be have a different narrative if the church had done its job in the beginning of things. And so when we go back to even abolition all the way through the civil rights movement, we find that the church in a lot of instances was an impediment to these things. And so God is getting our attention now, and so we got to seek Him and seek His guidance direction as we get through this. But also, we got to do our part. We got to study, we got to understand, and we got to have a conversation. They're hard, difficult, awkward conversations that we have to have because people have the right, as we talked about earlier, to say what they want to say, and I guess also do what they want to do.
But I don't want to interrupt you here, but we're getting farther and farther away from that, not closer.
Yeah, well, our challenge at Mission Mississippi is that we want to, you know, our theme for, we decided in August that our theme for 2020 is going to be going deeper, greater depth. We got to have deeper discussions. We got to have greater depth in our relationship.
You got to pray louder. I think that's it.
Well, no, pray more.
Well, no, pray louder.
No, pray more. And so we got to have these relationships that built on trust and respect, Paul. I'm talking about, we have relationships now that are shadow. This COVID-19 have exposed us in every arena, every aspect of our lives, right to the core. It exposes how shallow we are in terms of understanding the problems and how to deal with them.
Let me also confess here, because since that's the
put the curtain back up, Perez.
Here we go. When I hear Camus, when I hear Van Jones and things like that, here's what I hear. I hear no matter if you're walking on the civil rights line, if you have taken some bullets yourself as a white person, if you've lived a life that you've tried to do everything you possibly can, if you've done what you need to do, if you've been on the front lines, or if you are living that life as God wants you to live it, you're still a racist. You're still a sinner in that manner. You haven't done enough. You are to be condemned. And I think to a lot of white people out there, that's disappointing and aggravating. And it instills some anger there. So no matter who you are, if you are a white person, you are a bad person. You are a racist. And I mean, basically, that's what they're seeing right there.
So I would disagree with that. I would take us back to, I think we were off air and we were talking about gnats, and Neddie talked about how he mixes a little water Clorox solution to get rid of them. He said, we got to toughen up. With all due respect, I would say white folk need to toughen up. What I heard them saying was not, these are, particularly Camus, these are white folks who've been doing things. He's talking about the white folks who have done very little. They have this sort of sympathy for a moment. And there's a way in which many whites can hide behind the privilege of doing nothing. I think about the flag debate that we've had for several years in the state, and the number of white friends I have, white pastors in particular, who've said, we need to take it down. But I'm not going to say anything about it publicly. Well, if you want it down, then you got to work to get it down. Why just believe you should have it down?
That's a good example.
And not do anything. Yeah. You can call someone. You don't have to go on Facebook. You can call the legislator. You can call the governor, et cetera.
I don't disagree with that.
I'm speaking in that sense to, I think Camus was saying more about, let's not, because these moments happen, and even black folks do it. We get riled up. We talk about it for 2 weeks, and then we'll be on to the next issue. But in order to resolve whatever number of issues are going on in this nation, we need, as Neddie said, to go deeper.
Well, it's a good example because as far as Camus is concerned, I don't do yoga after this program.
Well, I was wondering, I don't think you do yoga.
But I will tell you that I've spent countless hours over the decades professing the need for a new flag. Yeah. So, again, it really, and by the way, Drew Brees has just apologized a few moments ago for insensitive comments. And I don't know what was insensitive about that, and that's the thing that,
I think,
that
Paul,
aggravates the hell out of me when somebody does that.
Okay, Paul.
Stand by what you said.
Okay. Stand by what you said, but understand the other. See, what he said without acknowledging how the other side is.
He wasn't asked that, though.
Don't shoot me. I'm just a messenger, all right? Listen, what we hear and what reality is in a lot of instances is two different things. What I heard Breeze say, that I think about my heritage and my family fighting wars to give me the freedom that I have here. What I heard the other guy say is that My family fought too, but I don't have the same privilege or the same right to exercise that you have, or I don't get the same acknowledgement that you have. Yeah. And so the narrative here, this is the point I want to make, is that when we speak, understand that when we speak is that there's another side, there's another discussion out there, but also is that in the society that we live in now, Paul, just hang on, we're going to get attacked. We're going to get attacked. So understanding that, how do I say what I need to say and say it in the right way, that not politically correct, but say what I say and mean what I say in a way that you understand.
I understand.
And you disagree with it, but at the same time, I have a right to say it.
I don't want to run out of time here.
Let me interject. I want to add to this, too, because one of the other things I think is problematic, I'm not a football fan, so this may offend folks. I'm not as concerned about what Drew Brees said or didn't say. I am concerned about what the Mayor Peddle said. I am concerned about what Attorney Hancock said in Madison County. These are people who are in places of position who say things that may be insensitive, maybe whatever. The concern is, how do we hold to account persons who are in authority, who have, and this is part of the broader question about race and racial profiling, et cetera. When you have the authority to do certain things because of your position, a football player can't really do that. I mean, maybe the football player can give money to a cause. But when the Mayor Peddle said what he said, and you see white and black folks stepping up and Peddle to say, you can't be here. When the all-white male, or all-white at least, board said, we need to get you to step down. I think those are more important conversations than whether or not a football player said one thing or another.
But Paul, comments like that should have consequences, basically, whether they're white or black.
Right. Yeah. But also in the Drew Brees case, from my perspective, is that what I know about Drew Brees, I know that he is not a racist based on public demeanor, public behavior, based on what he's done. Now, I need to help him understand, rather than criticizing and condemning him. Drew,
you
help
need
me
to educate him.
Not so much educate him. No. I need to be educated in the process as well. I need to understand more.
I understand, but you've already said, hang on for just a minute, because
I know this is your show.
No, I know, but this is what gets me, is you basically said that if I said something like, geez, I want America to be like in the good old days when I grew up. But that's a racist statement.
No,
I mean it's a racist statement. No, wait a minute. And if I'm talking to Neddie, I got to remember that every time I'm talking to a black guy or a black woman, then they're black, and I've got to. You said it. I got to give the other side. I have to say.
Can I get the other side now?
I wish we had. We got another segment. I wish we had the good old days like it was before, when there was patriotism. But being that you are black, and I recognize you are black, and I understand the situation, I understand slavery, then let me tell you, I don't want the other side of the old days, and then I've got to go through this disclaimer.
Catch your breath and count to 10. And let me say this.
Well, listen. Hang on. No, I'm going to give you the full time when we come back.
All right.
We got another segment here.
I'll wait.
It's what we call it.
I'm patiently. I'll wait.
Equal. Giving this to Neddie. Neddie, the mic is on. It's all yours, sir.
You know, Paul, what I was trying to get to is that when we have a relationship that is built on trust and respect, sometimes I may not get it, but that doesn't mean I don't care. And so when I say things and do things that you think are racist or you think is wrong, I want to have enough a clout with you, enough grace with you that you can spot me to point and say, okay, Neddie, I really don't understand. That's hurtful. That's harmful to me. Help me understand how you got that, or how you unfold that some more for me. And so those are the conversations we need to have. And so we have those conversations. All of a sudden, the light goes on, your perspective change. I call them Mississippi moments, or defining moments. So they're defining moments in our lives when we sit at the table. And I like what CJ said earlier about the governor and others sitting around the table talking about here's a camp and here's a different camp, and we got to understand that. And so we can't just lump everybody together. You know, when we make statements like the ones you played for us today, that was a paintbrush that just painted a whole race of folks. And you know, coming up and growing up and dealing in the culture, I get painted with that wide brush a lot. And so when you heard that was a wide swath of how white folks are, it doesn't mean that every white person is that way, but that's what you heard.
You're stealing all the time from the remaining time from Reverend Rhodes, but I do want to ask you one thing. Just as we get post-pandemic, and God help us to get there fast, we're going to see a dramatic change in things like education. But are we going to see that also as far as religion and organized religion?
It very well could be in many instances. I think, different folks have been looking at this, analyzing this. We may not really be out of the social distancing phase until sometime 21, even 22. And I think what has happened is that a number of churches that had not already made moves toward digital spaces and landscapes are going to be greater impacted by all of this. Some of them already are. You're probably going to see by the end of this, just like you see, the retail apocalypse, you're going to see a kind of a church apocalypse. You're going to see a number of churches that will not be around because of the financial issues and the inability to adapt to the moment. I think tragically in too many of our churches, and I think, the gospel says the same, God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore, but our methods have to be adaptive. And I think sometimes many churches are 20 years behind the curve. We're already too late.
Yeah.
And so by the time we see this, you're going to see some major difference. The other side of this, though, is I think COVID-19, social distancing, has increased a degree and desire for intimacy. So when we start seeing people feeling more comfortable coming back into spaces, I think many churches where there's a real sense of warm fellowship, you're going to see people coming because they're going to recognize how important relationships are.
Yeah.
I just want to say, COVID-19 and even the incident with the George Floyd thing is that now all of this stuff has been exposed, the disparities, how this affected minority communities greater than others. I want to understand, and this is what I'm pushing churches and others to do, is that now that you understand that our system is broken and that this disparity thing is unfair and all these other things, now what is it we're going to do going forward other than talk about it, other than recognize it? And I think that's some of the things Van Jones was talking about. We see these incidents, but what kind of action? Somebody said to me the other day, Ned, it's more than past time for the church to speak up. No, it's more than past time that the church stand up and do something. Do something different from having empathy and sympathy. But beyond that, what is it that you're going to do that we can do something to prepare and repair or develop opportunities that when things like this happen, one community is not adversely affected more than others?
So what's your Sunday sermon?
Well, I'm in.
He
book
does
of
Saturday
Acts.
night specials,
No.
man. You put him on the spot. No.
Well, I'm in the book of Acts for a series called Glorious Church from the Cross of Pentecost, and we're in Acts 3. And one of the things I'm going to speak to is how different Acts 3 is from Acts 2. Acts 2, we talk about, the Holy Spirit coming upon the church and the tongues and Peter standing up, giving a bold sermon, 3,000 added. Everything looks great. And then there's a lame man outside the temple in Acts 3. Peter and John heal him, and they get thrown in jail for it. And so it's going to help us think about what does it mean to do ministry in this COVID-19 moment that could cost us. Mm-hmm. We have to have the power of the Holy Spirit to go forth and do the work of the Lord, the work of the kingdom, and that work is sometimes costly.
You're still a relatively young pastor.
Oh, so 38. I think I'm still.
Yeah, I'm still
in our circles, I'll still be a young preacher to about 50. I think.
maybe a couple more interviews before his hair starts turning green, white. But are there sermons that you stay away, topics you stay away from?
Not necessarily, especially when you're a textual preacher or an expository preacher. You go through, and then there are things that pop up in the text that you have to speak to and you have to address. And, oh, Lord, I've been pastoring 10 years, been in ministry 20. There are a whole host of subjects that I've covered almost 20 years.
My friends, it's always good to have you.
It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting us, Paul. This has been fun.
I'm checking social media, and I think a lot of people have enjoyed it.
One of these days, and I challenge you every time I come, one of these days, we're going to start at 6 with you and end at 9 with you. How about that?
Then we'd have to have therapy.
That's okay.
That would be the therapy.
Neddie Winters, Reverend C.J. Rhodes. We will be joined by Vince Jordan, CEO of Labaki. We'll talk to him.